So we were talking about one pill solution. Let's just talk about that and break it down because we know already anybody who has had clients coaching or consulting, everybody's looking for the magic pill. So your thoughts?
Yeah, the one pill idea comes from the TV commercial that says, "Hey, you have this problem or that problem, and then here's this one pill, and then but as insiders in from the food and supplement industry, we all understand that the complexity behind that and what it takes to be able to say some of those things, and so we have this philosophical debate around, okay, is one pill enough to change somebody's life, or is it a combination of things, whether it be integrative health, supplements, nutrition, exercise, all those things. And so, but yeah, David and Judy, it's great to be on with you guys, and the meeting of minds, especially for food and supplement insiders like we are, who've seen, how the sausage is made and how the capsules are put together. And so it's going to be fascinating to talk about, where do we see our challenges right now, and then, where the future lies as well.
Definitely. The thing is, too, as I talk to people who aren't in the industry, understanding how, because lives are so complex, people want simplicity to the point of where ignorance is bliss, right? And it's been taken to the point of where people are assuming everything's done for them. Like all their foods are ready, prepared by a chef, or they're in a box, or, the medicine has been vetted out, which is an incorrect assumption a lot of time.
I think the incorrect assumptions come from early science, or what I call the low hanging fruit effect. So, the low hanging fruit in science, let's just say penicillin, it was his discovery that led to the idea that you could have an antimicrobial solution to particular groups of pathogens that may be infective, which is what everyone was looking for. Infective agents were killing a lot of people around the world. So, that ended up being a linear solution to a problem, or what appeared to be a linear solution to a problem. We now know that penicillin was generated due to a complex ecosystem of a microbiome of a particular thing that happened to be rotting, and it produced an antimicrobial, which we now know is a postbiotic. So these postbiotics, they happen all the time. We just didn't understand it. So I call it the low-hanging fruit effect. It's the things that we were able to control that are fairly easy linear solutions that seem to hit the mark. And that's what was sold to everybody. A pill for every ill, a solution, a linear solution for every problem. But what we started to discover was that linear solutions had complex adverse outcomes, or side effects. That's because you have a linear input in a harmonic ecosystem. So people still believe this because commercial interests and marketing want you to believe that, and they want your money. Now, I think some people are well intentioned, but what we're trying to do here is separate out some of those things and let people know, great, if it's a linear solution that's going to work, great. Yeah, you should do it. I think that's a good idea. Vitamin D and rickets, it's a good example. You either get outside or take supplemental vitamin D, and that'll kind of help you treat rickets.
And
But vitamin D is such a bigger story than just rickets, now we know. So in
Well,
complexity
yeah.
science, I think what you're really talking about here is necessary, but not sufficient. So necessary might be a linear solution, but it's not sufficient for the complex flourishing that we need to experience as human beings.
Well, and you could say, well, at the time that we had penicillin, it was a great help, but then we have to look beyond that to, the future and the planet, and, understand that our gut is a jungle. It's an ecology of different things, and so is the world around us. And so, it does it when you think about what we learned in sixth grade algebra is, when you say linear, well, you have a line and everybody can kind of comprehend, okay, this is the line, but the world doesn't always work in a linear way. And you think about the complexity of everything, it's like there's not just one line. There's, planes, lines going through every which way. And then sometimes they're curved, right? Sometimes they're U-shaped or N-shaped. And so you say, we have to really understand how the world actually works and not just break it down into these sound bites.
Or at least admit when we only have a partial solution and don't sell it as a full solution. right? I think we sell a lot of partial solutions as full solutions, and we shouldn't do that anymore. It's okay if we come to the table and say, hey, I got a great idea. And you do that and you take vitamin D, great, it's a partial solution. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient for flourishing. It's not
Well,
sufficient for planetary health.
that's right. And the complexity theory even goes down to when you go to see the doctor isn't just saying, "Hey, here's just this one pill." He might prescribe you four, five, six, or 10. And so, not that that's the way we're trying to go here, but at the same time, it's commonly accepted that there's never just one cause to a problem, and sometimes there's multiple causes that we don't know, but we figure out, well, that there could be multiple solutions to it too. And so the silver bullet approach has never resonated with me because, and with you guys, I'm sure too, because we all understand how the world works and we have common sense, and plus we have the experience that we do.
Well, I think one of the things too, so the bottom line is consequences, and in logic classes of the olden days, there was always the emphasis on consequence. You think it's the business model which are more competitive about being the first to win the race? Is the issue that the thinking model changed from thinking about consequences, looking at advanced probability, but using the fixed probability statistical tables like 100 years ago, rather than today, where it's more about adaptable probability and really kind of narrowing down, oh, in this instance, right? It's it's okay, right? So we have all of the exclusions and all of the instances listed, which turns into the 1,000 side effects on every drug packet. And for supplements, then we're accused of not being as rigorously monitored, I guess, by regulatory, because we don't have the 1,000 side effects and things like that, even though we still have the same data or the same type of scientific clinical studies and everything else going into all these.
I agree with that. I also think it's a little bit deeper than that, in that no one knew what these things were potentially doing. So
Well,
you just take a polyphenol, for example, and rewind 25 years. No one knew that polyphenols were probably prebiotics that were going to influence the guild relationships in the microbiome, and then change what they were going to tell the immune system, the brain, the inflammatory system, and postbiotics that they were going to make. We had
and
no clue.
these
Well,
are
we did kind of, if you don't mind me just throwing this out there.
Well, it was theoretical.
Vitamin
We knew
C,
it in animals 20 years
right.
ago and in test
But
tubes. It took
vitamin
20
C
years.
discovery, I think that's a Hungarian.
Yep.
When he purified vitamin C, it was not as effective as when he added back the paprika polyphenols or the bioflavonoids that accompany. That's why vitamin C and bioflavonoids are more effective than vitamin C itself.
That's why oranges are better than just
Sure.
vitamin C by itself.
Sure.
and
The
most
fiber
herbalists,
and
same thing about every botanical out there. Most herbalists I know have argued that we should not be using curcumin. We should be using whole turmeric from a good source. But it's identifying the good source and identifying, well, what makes it different. That's the part we don't really know. We have some studies.
Again, it's a spectrum. I think we all know this. Of course, you give curcumin in certain circumstances. Of course, you give turmeric in certain circumstances. Of course, you need high dose extracts in certain circumstances. Of course, you need a food supply of turmeric as a long term thing that you would eat on a regular basis. Parsing this and saying this or that, it never works. The spectrum approach is a far better one because then you can personalize it to the person.
well, and it's worth saying that there's a lot of placebo-controlled studies on curcuminoids and specifically curcumin and different forms and all that. The challenge is to get that amount of curcumin, you'd have to be eating a spice jar full of turmeric every day, and so then it's not.
Well, really,
Well,
to be honest, we're applying curcumin in a drug-like manner to the body. Let's be honest about that. We're taking it as an extract, wrapping it in a particular delivery system because the digestive system itself has difficulty transporting that into the body. So we give it some help with the liposome, a micelle, whatever it is. And then we raise the physiological dose inside the blood to perform a particular electrochemical or receptor action somewhere, right? That's okay. But let's be honest, that's a drug-like effect. If you want the nature-like effect, you're going to take the turmeric. So we need to be very honest about what we're doing. But at the same time, we take the approach that, of course, we're going to use all the tools that we have to make somebody healthy. Of course we are. Turmeric
Hey,
paste on it, but I need a cast. I have to go get it fixed. It's okay.
that's
But
right.
it's just saying like taking turmeric or curcumin is you're gonna live to be 106. No, you're not.
Oh,
It's bigger than that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not up to us to decide what turmeric works. It's up to science. And so the publications, you go to the literature, and then that'll tell you. And
Hmm.
so it's like it's hard to be agnostic towards anything other than science at this point. Yeah, but both might, all forms of turmeric might be good, but so like you said, some might be better for certain purposes and others are better for other purposes. And that's up to
Hmm.
that's up to objective scientific consensus.
Yes, I agree on that, but we're gonna throw another cataclysm in there that Dave's background is great for. So when you really, and this is part of the logic principles that I look at for consequence. When you're looking at the herbs themselves, you have to think about the agriculture, the microbiome of the soil. You have to think about when you're eating it. One of the reasons turmeric isn't absorbed is you don't have a strong enough microbiome to break it down into the components and make the metabolites correctly so that it is actually carried across.
And when you say, let's just pause for a second, because I think that's really important. When you don't have a strong enough microbiome, what does that mean? You're either missing specific taxa, the guild relationships aren't there, you don't have, you
Yeah.
don't have the right diversity relationship. So that would be Shannon diversity, alpha beta diversity. We actually don't know what a healthy microbiome looks like yet. We do know some of the things that incentivize a very unhealthy microbiome. So I think that we can, do that. But I think that's just a point that has to be made. A strong microbiome is one that has a lot of cross-sectional relationships that allow the microbiome, it's biodiversity. It has a whole bunch of things that can do a whole bunch of things that can do what it needs to do.
So
That's
now,
right. And well, it's worth pointing out that we do have markers for what that means. And so, if you have more Firmicutes than Bacteroides, for example, and enterotoxin producing, and then you have the pH aspect and Bristol stool scale. I mean, we got all the tools that we need
Mhm.
to figure it out. So now it's a matter of it being cheap enough and we're inexpensive enough now to do studies, whereas before it was prohibitively expensive.